So what are you saying, people? Is another episode of The Social Worker and the Mentor. We're back here again. Listen, shout out to Rob, to my bro Rob. Listen, you guys probably thinking, how comes you guys are doing something different? Listen, we're switching it up, new interface. But listen, you're going to see me and Rob together soon, innit? But you know where to find us. You like, subscribe and share. We're on TikTok, Instagram. We're on YouTube. We're soon to be on Apple. And if you want to come on the podcast, it's the socialworkerandmentor@gmail.com. So you see the little email there? Yeah, if you want to write in, just message myself and Rob. You want to be a guest, let us know. The panel's coming up very, very soon again. So if you want to come on, just come on. So guys, I got a very, very special guest. To my left, somebody who I have actually worked with. A very, 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 I'll say, powerful individual who absolutely is creating different spaces for social workers, but also very much focused on our own personal and emotional development. But yeah, you know what? I shouldn't even be speaking your accolades. Let me introduce yourself. Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Nana. So I'm Natalie. I am a social worker by profession, but currently the founder of The Social Life. So I started The Social Life as a way to support social workers in managing their own well-being. Initially, actually, I started it as an Instagram page. So I was just like really passionate about the work that I was doing. I was actually based in social workers in schools when I started the page. And
so you was a Swiss?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was my last role before becoming a consultant social worker in my current role now. And I was just passionate about sharing the work I was doing. So I was doing group work for children based in nurseries and primary schools, doing like workshops for parents and things like that before then transitioning into training and development for social workers. And that's when I started my business alongside that. So now I deliver training and group coaching for social workers in terms of managing our own well-being. Because what I noticed so much in the role, it's rarely ever about challenges in practice. It's more so about the emotions it raises for us and how we're able to navigate that. And that then impacts us so much in the work that we do. And I've had this like personal experience. I know when I first started in social work, when I was in youth justice, I did my ASYE there. I was there for almost 3 years. And just we're not fully prepared. We're not trained to be able to navigate all of that different stuff that comes up.
Anxiety, everything.
My gosh. Nightmares, struggling with sleep.
When you go on holiday, you're thinking about your cases and your children.
Yep. And there's no real preparation for any of that.
But can I ask you, Natalie, though, but why is that? Because it just seems like it's just the culture of the profession. Why is it that it hasn't changed? Because we've worked together anyway, and I know you're, as you said, you're very, very big on well-being. Why are we still unstuck when it comes to this?
Do you know, I think it comes to a point where it's just so normalized. Like it's stressful, it's overwhelming, and you just put up with it. And I got to a point actually when I worked in child protection, this was after my youth justice role, that I was like, surely this just can't just be it.
Yeah.
And I think we're so used to running, busying ourselves that even though we talk about the importance of creating space and reflecting, like it's becomes a norm to just keep going.
Yeah.
And actually, when I got to a point where I was just like so overwhelmed to a point where I left child protection, I was like, no, there has to be a different way to be able to navigate all of this overwhelm. And that's when I found my coach, and that's when I got really into coaching and training, because I was like, oh wait, there is a different way. And I think the reason why things haven't changed yet is actually it takes a lot of time to slow down and try to figure out how we can actually transition from this state of being so overwhelmed by it
and
all.
Heightened all the time.
Heightened, anxious. And don't get me wrong, it comes from a lot of the work we do, we're dealing with other people's trauma and other people's stress.
Yeah.
And so unconsciously, we pick up on that. Like our nervous systems. And so what I deliver training around is how we can regulate our nervous systems better, because we are constantly scanning for whether we're safe or unsafe. And so when this is unconsciously, right?
Yeah.
So when we're then stepping into families' homes where we co-regulate with them, there's a transference where we're picking up the emotional energies of stress, of fear, of
anxiety. It sounds like soul
anxiety.
ties, isn't it?
Big time.
Big time, yeah.
Big time. And if you think about it as well, like amount of social workers who have their own challenges and traumas and come into the role from a place of wanting to help and support and fix other people because of our own lived experiences, without the deeper, not just reflection, but actually capacity to release it as well. Because often we can reflect on those things and be like, oh yeah, these things have either happened in my life or I have a deep sense of injustice and I need to fight this in the world. But actually from that space of like hurt, we can't truly bring about long-term change a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So it's the more we're able to have capacity to catch it, the better we can actually do this work from a place of healing.
Yeah.
And truly be able to bring about change, not just within the children and families we're working with, but actually in our own lives and actually within our organizations. So instead of us emulating and mirroring the trauma that we see in the families' homes and it impacting us in our work environments, we'll see it day in, day out in different work environments. I know you've worked in lots of local authorities and same. And whether it requires improvement or outstanding, there's a similar energy of constant anxiety, a lot less space. Don't get me wrong, some local authorities have more spaces for wellbeing, and I think that's really powerful. And you can see the difference that makes. But actually, when we're not given that space and time, we just continue to basically exist in a organization of trauma. And that impacts people's emotional well-being, their sense of resilience, And we hear that word so much, resilience. But actually it's a state within our nervous system. Like there's a science behind it. Like physically, emotionally, we can build that capacity. So, and my whole thing, so in terms of like the training, you spoke about actually why isn't it being done sooner? The training, especially when we're talking about like training for student social workers. I remember when I was training, this was like 8-9 years ago now, I had a lecturer, bless her soul. I genuinely think it came from the right place, right? But I remember her telling us this story of how she was kidnapped by a service user, held up in the back of a van for like hours on end, and just this horrific story. And I remember sitting there like, is this the job I'm going into?
Am I going to be dealing with that?
Am I going to be dealing with that? So you come in from a state of fear, and fear is a powerful energy, but it actually keeps us really stuck. It puts us in that state of fight or flight, right? So we're constantly in a state of fight or flight, anxious, expecting to come up against a lot of resistance. And that isn't a space where we can truly step into a space of courage and have courageous conversations and acknowledge, okay, this person may well not, if I'm going into a family's home, maybe they're not going to receive me well, or maybe they're not going to agree with things I say. But actually from that space of being able to say, okay, I accept this and I can step in, instead of coming from that space of fear and anxiety where people then will fall into people pleasing, struggling to have the right conversations, struggling to even assess risk accurately because actually you're so overwhelmed by your own emotions, fear of what people might say, think, feel about you in that situation, or fear of actual threat towards us. We're not fully in a capacity to truly make effective change for families and reflect.
Sorry to interrupt you here, because what you just said is mind-blowing. And you know what? It sounds stupid. It sounds really stupid what I'm about to say. But what you said about how we as social workers operate in a state of fear, it's weird because it's kind of like I kind of already knew about it, but only because of how like you've contextualized it, because I actually think you're right. I think even at university, when we go and talk about our experiences and the burnout, we're already in a way, even though we have to speak and give students and social workers the real, we're already putting a bit of fear into them anyway. So by the time they come in, not that there isn't that kind of fear, it does impact on what you said in terms of how it is they work. Because ultimately, if you have fear as a social worker, that means you're going to always struggle to be transparent. When you mentioned about people pleasing, I'm going to go as far as even saying, when we're speaking with management, that I know our managers are our managers, but even people pleasing where our manager might go and say to you, can you go and do this? Even when you haven't got the capacity to.
Yes.
And therefore, as you said, your body, you're not going to be able to even, one, do what you need to do because you've already gone and said yes to another job. And two, being able to make effective decisions because you're basically split and you're pretty much thin on the ground as a practitioner. And I think that's quite powerful. Do you feel as though that state of fear, and I'm going to be quite controversial, is it top down? Is it down up?
Both and, yeah.
Okay.
So, and it's so important to, and I'm so huge on everyone being able to understand this at every single level that they're at, whether you're a student, experienced social worker, senior manager, senior leader, we all have the power within us to impact how other people experience the world, right? So it's understanding that. So there are actually 5 stages of burnout that people don't fully understand. And the first one I call superhero mode, right? So it's this, you step into the role, you step into your work, maybe you've just come back from annual leave, you've come back from holiday, or you're just starting out in the role. You come in with a sense of, I'm going to save, I'm going to fix the world, I'm going to make all these changes. And you have this, and I don't know if you've seen all the memes, superhero social worker, miracle worker.
Yeah, miracle worker, yeah.
To be honest, it can be really toxic state of mind to think that it's on us to change people's lives. Actually, we're humans helping humans.
Yes.
And I think when we understand from that space, instead of this superhero mode, we're better able to really consciously decide on what we can and can't do.
Savior complex.
Absolutely, savior complex. Absolutely. And then from that space of that superhero mode, savior complex, we then transition because we think, I can take it all on, into that overcommitment. So is that what you talked about, people pleasing, saying yes to things from either your manager, from service users, when you do not have capacity.
Yeah.
And that's just a state of fight or flight, right? So we fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Yeah, fawning. Ooh. Fawning is a state in your nervous system where you're constantly you're on high alert and it's like if there's a lion chasing you down the street, you stop and you're like, please lion, don't eat me, I'll do anything. That's logically, fear isn't logical, right? So we're gonna, without the space to really take a step back and think about what it is we're doing and what it is we're gonna say next or whatever, we just automatically say yes to things, right? And so it becomes very reactive, and you see it day in, day out, very reactive in practice. And so that overcommitment keeps us in a state of overwhelm, anxiety, and we're just overwhelmed to the point where your body and your mind will begin to send alarm bells.
The body keeps a score.
Absolutely keeps the score, right? So when you're in that state and your alarm bells are ringing, that will be physically, maybe you get tension headaches, you're struggling with your sleep, you're either overeating sugary high foods because you're just craving dopamine just to feel anything good, or you're like me, this is how my nervous system reacts, I just will stop wanting to eat at all. So actually, because you're so in fight or flight, you're just grabbing the quickest things, but you're not acknowledging actually, what does my body need right now? And from that space, we're just constantly there's your body and your mind, which is your nervous system. We are psychosomatic beings. Our mind and bodies work together. Will be sending us signals. And when we're not creating the space to slow down and acknowledge what's going on for us, we will automatically, basically your body will shut down for you.
Yeah.
So we enter from that space of alarm bells ringing into that state of shutdown or burnout, right?
Yeah.
And for some people and for everyone that will look slightly different. So for some people, burnout is complete mental exhaustion. They just can't cope.
Others may lose weight, not sleeping.
Absolutely, exactly. And so I'm always big on actually understanding, what does that look like for you?
So what's the feedback? So Natalie, because what you're saying, and I think everyone is very, very important, I'd say particularly for social workers and students watching this, because like I said, I work with Natalie very, very closely. Everything, Natalie, that you've said is very, very powerful. And like I said, I've been on one of your trainings anyway. I joined one of your online trainings. So when you're having these discussions, and I'm going to go even further now, because I know you do roll this out in L&D, learning development, and for senior leaders, and you're speaking to them about this amongst the social workers and students. What is the feedback? Because everything you're talking about is going to reflect, as you said, how a local authority operates, because it's about the workforce.
Yeah.
What are leaders saying to you when you're thinking about this training, about how the expectations is impacting upon how social workers are performing?
Do you know what? It's an interesting one, and it's a mix. And I think what I've noticed, it sometimes depends on what they're already doing to support their social workers.
Mm.
So for many, it depends. For some, I think it comes from a space of actually, there can be a lot of ego in social work.
Yeah.
From all humans, like
Yeah.
myself included. Like, we have a sense of pride of like, actually we want to show all the great work we're doing, and so it can be really difficult to say, actually there are some things we need to work more on in terms of looking after our social workers on the ground. Some struggle to see the connection between why this is so important and how it actually impacts children in practice. But then others are like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, actually the more we invest into our social workers, the more we get to the more we know, we have better outcomes for children and families ultimately.
Yeah.
Because actually we're having less social workers burning out. And so at the moment, I'm at a point in my business where I'm opening up more so to local authorities and branching out more in that side of things. So last year I was running group coaching programs for social workers directly, and I just know that the impact for this is bigger.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
As much like, it's so powerful to see the social workers on the ground like making those changes and the impacts it has made for them. Like recently, actually a couple of weekends ago, I had a catch up with some of them, and just seeing where they were at, like one of them was 6 months into her ASYE, completely like burnt out. At that point, basically she was past the alarm bells. She was like shut down.
Yeah.
She needed to enter into that state of rest and recharge, right? Which is the 5th stage that we go into. But without entering back into that superhero mode, it takes really unpicking the narratives that we have around work, our own self-worth, giving without being able to receive and hold space for ourselves. So we see like getting to see the impact that actually she's able to continue to embed those things without the feeling of feeling that overwhelm constantly. It makes a world of difference. And then instead of burning out and leaving the profession, which she was literally at a point of like, am I going to stay in my ASY or not? She was like, no, I've signed up for this for a reason. There is purpose in the work that we do, and there is ways that I can hold space for myself to regulate and continue to build that awareness so I can better manage my own expectations of myself and the work. So and a few weeks ago I actually delivered a session to, I'm not going to name the local authority, but to a local authority, their cohort of newly qualified social workers. And the feedback from the social workers was, oh my gosh, I hadn't even considered these things. Because it's not really overly complicated.
It's not, but we don't consider it.
But no, because actually when we do have the space and time to consider, it's like, oh, actually, I don't have to kind of buy into this narrative that I have to be stressed or I have to find work hard. I've chosen to do a job that I love and I enjoy. So what am I complaining about it 24/7? Not to say that it takes away from being challenging.
Yeah.
But actually we get to be like, oh, okay, there's a weight to the work that we do. It's heavy, right?
Yeah.
But actually we can train ourselves to carry this weight a bit better, bit by bit. And that comes in understanding how to self-regulate our nervous system. So I've developed my own framework, actually.
What is your framework?
It's called the SAFE framework, I call it. Okay. So the S stands for self-regulation. So understanding your physical, the physical things you can do for yourself each day. And it's the basics: eating well, sleeping well, and exercising, all of those different things. We know it, but actually understanding underneath it, why am I not doing the things I know are good for me?
Yeah.
And going automatically to, like, sometimes we doom scroll on social media, or we will project outwards and be like, well, my manager's not giving me the time, or I don't have the time and I can't do this. We project outwards and blame outside of us for whatever we've got going on inside. Or we will suppress it completely, be like, no, it's fine. That was my go-to. When I was in practice, I was like, I'm fine.
But you weren't. Yeah.
No, what? Listen, when I was in child protection, I remember I was like, oh yeah, everything's fine. I got to a point where my partner at the time asked me like, oh yeah, how was your day? I burst into tears. I didn't even know I was carrying that much, you know? And so it's being able to create space for yourself each day.
Do you know what's so crazy? Like for me, burnout, I'll tell you what burnout feels like for me. I remember burnout for me, when I went through burnout, it felt like, and it was quite unhealthy, Natalie, what I was doing when I was in child protection. Because the thing is, and I will tell social workers as well, I think I did child protection for 8 years straight, non-stop, no rest, no break. So burnout for me, and what I used to do, Natalie, is that, so I used to get to work early, do late visits, get home 10 o'clock, eat late, watch an hour of TV, 12 o'clock go to sleep, and then get up again 6 o'clock and go to work. And then what happened is that I started getting I started getting very, very tired. And I think at one stage actually, I actually got sick actually. Yeah, I actually got sick. And I remember I came into work, I had a massive headache. And then my manager, bless her, like she was like my mum anyway. And then she put my head and she goes, Nana, whoa, your temperature's hot, you know. I was like, no, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then I went home. And then I went to I think I didn't go back to work for like a week or so. She goes, Nana, you've gone through burnout. But then for me, it also feels like, you know, when you go gym and you get, what's it called? Delayed onset muscle soreness. That's what burnout feels like for me. And my body just, I just felt so tired. And then my colleagues were the ones that actually spoke to me, said, Nana, you know what? I can't remember the last time you went on holiday. All I know is that you come in, you go to work, and that's it. And I was in my early 20s. You don't go on holiday. You don't take no time off. I was like, but the work needs to get done. And then they said, no, you need to travel. So then I started traveling, Natalie, and I started being a lot more boundaried with myself and with my time. But what you're saying, Natalie, is important because I think for many of us, and I'm going to say it openly here on the podcast, your tray is never empty as a social worker.
Yeah.
Your tray as a social worker, regardless whether you work in assessment, child protection, whether you work in looked after, any part of social work within children, particularly children or even in adults, your tray is never empty. And I think what Natalie's saying, she's right. It's about you being able to have that kind of understanding that this is the weight that I'm going to carry, but I need to put mechanisms in place to manage it. So yeah, your tray is never going to be empty. That's something I need to say. But go on, Natalie, so about this safe framework.
I think that's really important, Nana, because and that brings us to the A of awareness. Actually, you were able to catch, I can't keep running on this fuel, right? Yeah. And I often say, like, the fuel that gets you to that one destination of becoming a social worker won't be the fuel that keeps you going. So often we see people that come into the profession filled with like this fight of like, I need to save all these lives, I need to keep going. Like, if I don't keep going, then other people won't. Like, I mean, we're talking about children, right? Yeah. Like child abuse, it's like really serious, heavy stuff. So it's this constant fight, but actually bringing the awareness to, actually, what am I carrying? What narratives am I telling myself about who I am in the world? Actually, I can give to others and never take space and time for myself. Yeah. Actually, it's not sustainable over time. Yeah. So we have to get to a point where we're able to switch fuels, right? Otherwise, we're just going to burn out at that point. And then understanding that from the self-regulation, building that awareness of actually what can I continue to do each day for myself to hold space. And I talk about, like, especially when I'm delivering training, like there's lots of different things we can do. And I say to everyone, pick one and start with one and build up as you go from there. And that can look like literally physically moving your body each day. Like, we sweat out stress and cortisol. We're not made to hold it in. Yeah. So when that stress, we're holding in that cortisol, all of that stuff in our body, it keeps us in a state of fight or flight. Yeah. And we have to learn to transition from fight or flight into a state of safety, called safety, social engagement in our nervous system. It's basically a state where you're able to be more calm, you're able to kind of access that joy. It's like a state of joyful urgency. So like, you're getting things done, but actually it's not like fighting through the day.
You're enjoying the work you're doing.
Absolutely, because again, we've chosen to do it. And I remember I was delivering training to newly qualified social workers like a couple months ago, and I was like, remember, you've chosen to do this work, and one of them was like, oh yeah. Like sometimes it's like we forget, like it's like, it's so stressful, but like, I've chosen to be here, and actually there's a reason why. So how can you continue to connect with that why, your purpose for being there, instead of like getting into the role and then literally kind of fighting through the week and then can't wait till the weekend because that's when you live. Like, actually no, we live every single day of the week. Like, we get
that's true, you know.
Yeah, right. We're constantly waiting for our next. Not to say like, take your holiday, take your annual leave, please, please. Don't get me wrong here.
No.
But at the same time, we're constantly like waiting to escape the world. Like, I just can't wait to get home, or I can't wait for the weekend, or I can't wait for that holiday. You've chosen to be here, and actually, yes, it feels heavy, but it can be so easy to constantly look to feel good. But remember, there's a difference between happiness and fulfillment. Right? So when we are truly fulfilled in the work that we're doing, it's remembering that fulfillment comes from doing work that you know is meaningful,
and
purposeful, but not doing it as a way to escape your daily life. Also remembering that you get to hold space for yourself. So if anyone ever has a conversation with me, I'm going to talk about journaling. And the reason why I talk so much about it, like you could talk self-inventory, daily check-in, whatever you do to check in with where you're at, what energies you're holding on to, what energies sometimes are not yours that you're holding on to. So really understanding yourself, and the better we can look at certain things of actually, there's so many times where we will hold on to like feeling anxious or angry or whatever it is. Like I've had a conversation with my manager and they've disrespected me, or there's so many different things that we hold on to. And it's like, oh, actually, what am I making this thing mean? It's rarely about the thing outside of us. Often our perception, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. Yeah. So it's remembering that our perception will impact how we interact with others in the world. It will impact how we assess risk. And so it's I cannot talk enough about how important it is to hold that space. So that's the thing that I always recommend mainly, but there's lots of different things that I'll talk about like in my training. But the F is talking about transitioning from that state of fear that we spoke about into courage, because fear, don't get me wrong, our nervous system, it responds to whether we're safe or not safe basically constantly. So am I safe or am I unsafe? We will often be in a state of fear when we're perceiving a sense of threat. So actually, we're dealing with some really heavy stuff. Actually, it raises a level of anxiety within us. Okay, what's the next best thing I could do? Observe this emotion, observe the feeling and sensation, but what's the next logical step? What's the next courageous step I can take to either, and it doesn't have to look like, I just need to put up with it and keep up this fight and pretend like everything's fine. No. What it is being able to say, actually, maybe there's a conversation that needs to be had here. Maybe there's something that I can do for myself to
make myself feel safe.
Exactly. Connecting with my breath. So powerful. Literally, it could take a couple minutes to just truly connect with your breath deeper into your stomach, and then the deeper we breathe into our stomach, actually allows us, it transitions our nervous state from that state of fight or flight into safety.
It's so holistic, Natalie, what you're saying. And I guess as social workers, depending on what kind of teams you're in or general, we don't actually take our time with this. The calls, the emails, things you need to get through, and then maybe people pumping emails to you, and it's like you're like, I just need to just get it done and get it. We don't take our time with it. I gotta admit, even I'm guilty with it. I don't take my time with it. I'm like, you know what? Let me just respond to an email rather than be like, you know what? Wait, pause. This is what the email's saying. This is what the person's asked, or even like sending a holding email. You know what? I'm just in the middle of something, or you know what? I will get back to you on this date, and make it a lot more measured. We don't think about it at all. We don't.
And the reason why that's so important, because we can say, let's slow down, but actually, why is that important in practice? And just remember, we're making some really big decisions about children's lives. So here in like the whole email thing, even in that, like definitely taking the time to slow down. I've actually recently taken the step. I said to myself this year, I'm going to be even less reactive, really trying to do that, because especially since like lockdown, everyone has access to you on Microsoft Teams all of the time. People will just call you. I don't answer all the time, and even if I'll just give myself a few minutes just to be like, okay, cool, because I think I'm trying to transition myself from that constant reactivity. If it's really important, people will message you quickly. But actually, rarely is everything urgent all the time, even though we're dealing with high pressure work. But in that state of fight or flight, we lose our capacity to discern between what is and what isn't important. So we're constantly like, let me respond to all of this at this moment. Everyone's calling me, and this meeting's important. And we can't be in 10 billion different places at once. So how are we prioritizing what is most important for this child right now? And actually, if I don't hop on this call or answer this email, what will happen? Will it impact a child right now? And when we are in a state of that fight or flight, it's a state of fear. We're not able to discern clearly on, okay, this is important right now and this isn't. So the more we're able to, it takes a lot of courage to even just hold space for yourself and acknowledge, actually, I'm carrying a lot of anxiety here. Who do I need to maybe speak to? What things do I need to do for myself each day consistently that I know transition me out of that state? Going for a walk. I talk about cold showering. Check with your doctor, please, before you ever do that. But actually, like for me, I know like a symptom of like that fight or flight state was often in my skin. So I've had eczema since I was like a child, and actually being able, like, cold showering has like been huge in, like, I no longer get it, which has been incredible. But actually, all it does is it puts our bodies naturally into a state of fear. And then we're able to connect to your breath and calm down and realize that actually I'm safe in this space. And so that's just like psychologically, there's so much science behind it. If you want to look into it, please do. But even aside from that, like you don't have to be as extreme as like culture.
No, but I know what you
but
mean,
like
coping
little things you can
mechanisms,
do each day, and it actually builds your nervous system. We've got something called a vagus nerve, and it touches from our brain into every single organ in our bodies, and it transitions us from that state of fight or flight into psychological safety, or into the state of shutdown and burnout if we're not listening to it. So there's little things we can do each day just to transition ourselves bit by bit into safety. And so the more we do that, the more you're like, oh, actually, this thing's coming at me. Or maybe it's raising anxiety, but I can observe it, know that I'm not this feeling. I'm feeling it, but I'm not anxious. I'm experiencing a sense of anxiety or fear. And I can transition out of that just by literally, okay, maybe I'm not able to get up and go for a walk right now because I'm maybe in a home visit with a family and they're saying something that, I'm making me feel a bit anxious. Just observe it and relax behind it. And that's a really powerful shift in just being able to say, this is coming up, but I don't have to listen to my mind constantly. We can act in contradiction to our feelings.
Yeah.
But equally, holding space for them is really important.
Do you think, Natalie, it depends on what kind of team you're in though? Because if you're in a fast-paced team, like an assessment team, where you have to make quick decisions and you have to go out, would you say it's harder to be able to go through those stages than if you're in like a safeguarding team where you've got a bit more time, or you're in looked after children's team? Would you say it depends on the team you're in, or is it just down to us as the practitioners to be able to try and get that in place, irrespective of where we are or which team we're in?
It's really important so this doesn't happen overnight. So you can like attend one of my trainings and you won't go out the next day and be like, oh yeah, everything's perfect and fixed. You won't stop experiencing those emotions, and it doesn't depend necessarily on the team you're in. But I do like strongly believe that it does depend on how well your manager is able to do these things as well.
Right.
Because what I find, and their managers are different depending on their lived experiences, depending on how they naturally navigate stress and their nervous system's response, because it's formulated from our most formative years, right? So often when we go into that state of fight or flight, our nervous system's just responding as it would have done in our own childhoods or earlier in our years, in our lives. So understanding that in management is so important for us to be able to hold that space for ourselves so we can observe that, because actually, especially in states of like leadership, I mean, we talk about PCF 9, technically all social workers are leaders in a sense, right? But we have to have the capacity to lead ourselves before we can lead others. And what I think something that's not taught to us in social work, often it's like, oh yeah, leadership is presenting a meeting or chairing a meeting, but actually there's so much more that comes to it. So regardless of the team you're in, and yes, it takes a lot of training your nervous system in any space you're in.
Yeah.
So it's even more important in the more reactive teams. So in the teams that are assessment, you're having to go out and respond to things, especially on duty weeks, or you're in a child protection team and there's a lot of phone calls. I mean, you'll have some random weeks where all of your cases are popping off at once.
And they're all blowing up.
And it's all blowing up. I mean, even in like looked after teams, everything kind of kicks off at once, and all like, I see that as an opportunity for you to process a lot of fear, right? Instead of being like, oh my gosh, all of this stuff's going on. Oh, okay, this feels heavy. Okay, how can I better observe these things? What do I need to double down on to make sure I'm looking after myself during this week? And there will be weeks where you're coming home late every night. There will be days where you're not able to maybe eat lunch, for example, because you're just scrambling through the day. But knowing that that's not going to be a consistent practice every day, the more you're able to bring awareness to that, whether you're a social worker, team manager, or at senior leadership, it's important to be able to understand this, because we co-regulate with one another. So when we're holding a lot of anxiety,
we project that
onto others, exactly, and vice versa. So especially as managers, there's a huge power in how you navigate your stress to be able to be in a state of calm, so you can support others to go regulate with you and hold that space. Because it's so easy to be really fast-paced and case. But actually, how are you? Like, okay, like at least let's hold 10, 15 minutes to be able to have a conversation about how you genuinely are doing before we hop into cases. And it's, yes, we're working with children, we're working with families, and it's important to talk about those things, but actually understanding the impact of not talking about or holding space for other people's emotions will impact in their capacity to do the work effectively.
Yeah.
Because yes, it's that that saying about thinking fast but slowing down, being able to slow down but actually thinking fast but knowing that.
I know what you mean. Yeah,
I'm trying to remember. There's a title of this book. Was it Thinking Fast and?
I think it's fast slowing down. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But I was talking about it the other day in a science and safety training actually. But actually, it's knowing that we have the capacity to slow down. And the more we're able to slow down, the more we can speed up in practice as well. So that we're less reactive because actually we're in the space where we're able to be more present with what's needed as opposed to in a cloud. So it's like sometimes when we're so overwhelmed with our own emotions, we're walking around with a thick fog.
Yeah, you can't see what
and
you're
you
doing.
can't see what you're doing. You'll think
Yeah.
like, actually, I'm just doing the work and I'm busy. But actually, are you productive?
Yeah.
Busy doesn't always equal productive.
No.
And because it's so easy to be like, I've got this thing to do, I've got to do that, and blah, and I'm just go.
And the qualities won't
And the
be
quality,
there.
exactly. Because ultimately, we need to really focus on the quality of the work we're doing. Yes, it's important to stick to keeping within time scales and doing visits within, depending on what teams you're in, but like your assessment visits, your child protection visits that need to be done every 10 working days, your child in need every month. Knowing that, okay, I've got to do all these things and I've got all of these things going on, it's really important to be able to slow down so that you can better prioritize your time. And actually, I see this time and time again. So in my full-time role where I support in newly qualified social workers and training and development, there's such a stark difference between the ones who come into the role already with quite a high level of self-regulation. So they are consistently like working out, for example. They take space and time to like meditate. They do things for themselves outside of work that brings in that state of calm into the work. And comparatively, starting the work where, there's no real routine. That was me. This isn't me shading anyone because this is how when I first started.
I was like that as well.
No,
work.
You go in, you just kind of pass out. You're just chilling. You're eating your crisp.
That's it.
Like that was it.
Visit, case note, go to home,
Literally.
go home, TV, eat, same thing.
And it's like rinse and repeat over and over again.
Yeah.
But actually what that does is you don't give yourself the space to transition into states of safety. So you're still running on that cortisol. It's go. You're not really processing what's gone on in the day. And so you carry one day into the next. And as soon as something really big or stressful hits, it's like, whoa, and it all feels so overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because you haven't given yourself that space and time. Actually, doing all those things that are good for you, they won't always feel good, but it's important to do them consistently because it allows you that space and time to do those things. And also, I didn't talk about the E from the SAFE framework. So the E actually is then how we manage our own expectations. Actually, what stories am I telling of myself? Actually, do I believe that I deserve the space and time? Do I truly believe that I'm worth holding space for? Like, we talk so much about how we support our like young people, children with their sense of self-worth, even the parents we work with, their self-worth, but a large proportion of social workers struggle with their own self-worth.
In the job role, feeling
unappreciated, feeling like actually it's a thankless job. But actually we don't come into the role to get thanks. We come here to support people. But equally, managers need to understand the power of appreciation. And actually, there's so many studies on this that there's lots of different like organizations that talk about well-being. And the research says that actually the more people feel appreciated in the work that they do, the longer they're likely to stay in a profession.
But I think our culture, Natalie, unfortunately, we're not always good at doing that. Because I can say that I've been in service meetings where senior leaders might go and say, has anyone got anything else to say? And all social workers are stum. They don't want to go and say anything. But outside of those meetings, though, they don't feel appreciated. And that's what often for me, I've always gone to the social workers. I just want to say that I appreciate the work you're doing. Because I think when we talk about well-being, and it's going to link in a bit to performance, that often when you're not performing, well-being, you're not going to be feeling like you're doing well when you're always in the red. But I think it's important for us to be saying that, yes, we know you're in the red, but we recognize the fact that the job is hard. We recognize the fact that there's a lot of competing demands, but you're doing well. Funny enough, Nadine in the previous episode, she said something, and I want to ask you this question as well. But do you think there should be a KPI for well-being, retention, and recruitment?
100%. 100%. And the reason why I say this is it's so interesting that there's no real studies that I've been able to find around actually social workers' well-being in terms of them coming into the role. So we talk about adverse childhood experiences for
the ACEs,
I mean, there's lots of research around like doctors and nurses and things, but none on social workers, which is interesting because overwhelmingly people come into the role with their own sense of overwhelm. How are we then supporting to manage that? And actually, if there's no real KPIs on actually how are we looking after our staff, it's not an incentive then for local authorities and for senior leaders, because we're just so focused on what's going on for the children and families. But we need, especially if we are systemic and holistic in looking at well-being for children and families, social workers are a key part of that. And actually, if you're not well within yourself to be able to do the role, how are you going to do it effectively? We see like so many families have social worker after social worker, and it's like
it's a revolving
door. And actually the impact on that, we're working with families who already have a lot of challenges around their own sense of attachment and trust from people within their own families and lives, let alone from professionals. So they see one person coming in, another person leaving, another like coming in and coming out. How are we actually building a sense of safety or helping them to challenge those narratives for them as well, to know that actually there are people that can consistently be here, that care, and that are able to support you. And then, of course, we don't want to be involved in their lives forever, so then transition out. But we work and deal with relationships, right?
Yeah.
Like everything we do is relationships. And it's remembering that relational practice, it needs to start from within the organization. Exactly. It needs to start from us. And actually, if we are looking to instill certain values within the families that we're working with, we need to do so within our own organizations first. It's like we need to model that family that we're looking to support.
And I agree with you. And I think, Natalie, that with what you're saying, you mentioned something very, very earlier about how at times the superhero kind of thing can be very, very toxic. And I think that at times in local authority settings, because I've been in various local authority settings, that I feel as though that model is not always there. And at times the environment for social workers can be very, very I have to be open and say it. Can be very, very toxic, where social workers do not feel that management and senior leaders have them in mind. Speaking for me, one thing about me, when I've managed all my teams, I've always had my teams in mind, because I understand as a manager that, and you've probably seen it, there's a quote that your manager has a big impact on your mental health. And I understand the importance of me being a manager who holds my team in mind, because if I don't have my team in mind, take performance out of it, but do I have them in mind in terms of the work that they're doing? Do I have them in mind in terms of how they're feeling? And I think in local authority settings, we don't. We lose the model of what you said, the emphasis of family, because we are so focused on trying to get the work done that we lose being person-centered with our own social workers. I think it's a big problem within the profession, because you've probably, Natalie, had it as well, and I've had it, where even doing this podcast, I've had so many messages from social workers and students who speak openly about their practice educators and how their managers don't make their life easy in local authority. And at times, even for myself, at times in my position, I've had to often, I'm not going to say battle, but at times clash with senior management and senior leaders, because as much as you want the work to be done, you can't expect that from your service if your service is not at 100% personally or within themselves well-being. If you're not modeling that as a leader, your social workers are not going to model that in practice. You know, we often, Natalie, at times, we always worried about Ofsted, when Ofsted come and do their inspections, you know, to kind of look at us. And I often feel as though, and I'm going to jump on the back of what you said, that I feel outside of the general Ofsted inspection, there should be a wellbeing inspection as well. There should be a wellbeing inspection across all local authorities for, you see, like with what you're doing, for you to like come in, you know, and ask social workers independently, how is it actually getting on in their local authority? Not work. How is the environment make them feel or make them practice, because we don't. We don't, and often there's, it's interesting what you're saying about your model, about your safe model. I'm gonna go to the F, that I do feel that there's an element also, Natalie, at times of fear within the local authority setting.
Absolutely.
And that's why you get a lot of social workers who don't want to speak, because they're very much scared of repercussions if they're talking about the fact that I haven't got any capacity. It's not a way, Natalie, I think our profession should be going. And I often kind of say, is that the pace that we're trying to set for social workers right now? If we were talking right now about well-being and that model of family and being person-centered, yeah, at times, Natalie, I feel at times we don't hold it enough for our social workers and for our students in local authority settings. And as you said earlier, that yes, I think different managers, different leaders, we all have different ways of managing our social workers and how we lead our local authorities. But if we don't make our practitioners feel safe, yeah, this is the reason why we're going through what we're going through. And I think it's just very, very important that I need to speak and say that as a manager, because I really am speaking to leaders directly, and I'm speaking to my other colleagues in management, that what Natalie is talking about in terms of safe, and what she's mentioned about the fact that how social workers and managers, how we are, how that can be reciprocated towards our families. But we at times are not setting that tone for our social workers. And so I think, our PCF, critical analysis and reflection, if we think about Gibbs, my message that I'm going to put out to managers and leaders is, when you have your service meetings and you ask questions as to, has anybody got anything else to say within your service, and they're quiet, you need to think about the reason why they're quiet on that. Are they quiet on it because they're fully stressed, or are they quiet on it because actually we are not creating a safe environment for them in terms of how they feel? Yeah, and it's important that I say that. I'm not firing shots at anybody. This is just about being open. I'm in management. And if social workers have said that they feel as though that managers are not making them feel like this, or making them not feel safe, it's a culture in a local authority setting that we do need to change. And I think, Natalie, your model of being safe and that wellbeing inspection, we need to do it.
And I love everything you just said, Nana. And I'm going to offer a bit of a challenge as well to social workers, more so.
Yeah.
Because I believe it's both and. That it's really, especially, I deliver separate training for managers on how they can better create that safe space. But I also believe deeply that social workers have to have the capacity to build that internal sense of safety for themselves also. Because especially, we can, depending on your own lived experiences that you've been through, we can easily come into a role already holding a sense of injustice, feeling like we've experienced being a victim in the past potentially, and you carry that into any dynamic. So sometimes it's not always just your manager. Sometimes you're carrying stuff, and energies look to tango at times. So sometimes you'll come into a situation where it's like, oh, my manager's always doing this, blah, blah. But actually, I believe deeply in radical responsibility. Like, how can I take responsibility for certain things as well? So yes, like senior leaders, team managers, whoever you are in terms of leadership, understanding the power that you have to create safe spaces is really important. And social workers, you have that duty for yourself to process whatever comes up for you. Because sometimes, so I'll give an example actually. When I was doing my ASYE, I had a really fantastic practice educator. At the time, I'd say early on, I don't think I acknowledged that. And that was more so because there was a time where she offered like a really big challenge for me, basically saying that I felt like I wasn't doing everything that I could be doing. I wasn't evidencing the great work I was doing, but I was getting really good feedback from all my colleagues and stuff. So I wasn't getting it. I was like, I just felt like I was being victimized. I was like, she's not getting it. And I was like, what is going on here? And I remember this was actually at the point where I ended up calling my mum. I was like almost 6 months in. I was like, called up my mum. And I was like, I can't do this job. Blah, blah. She's doing this, blah, blah. And my mum was like, really, Natalie? And I love that she was able to be like, you didn't sign up for this job just to quit, yeah? So whatever you can do, go back in there. And evidence to think, do the things that she's asking you to do. To be honest, all I did was send a few extra emails. No, I'm being so for real. Because I think I knew there was certain work I was doing that maybe I just needed to evidence it more. And that's cool. But actually being able to take that responsibility and say, I know I can do this role and I know I'm doing a good job at this point. How can I evidence that better? So sometimes our practice educators, our managers are going to offer us healthy challenge. Depending on where we're at, we will either perceive it as a threat, as being a victim, as being feeling not good enough. Often, like there's so much of that
imposter syndrome, yeah,
right? And we can either choose to internalize that and say, no, maybe it's not for me.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being victimized by this manager, but we need to really clean up our own stuff to be able to look at it effectively and say,
take that autonomy.
Yeah, and take that autonomy. So we're not able to fully discern. Again, I talk a lot about discernment, but we're not able to discern fully between whether our manager is doing, like, I guess, carrying stuff towards us and maybe victimizing us or not allowing our voices to be heard and not holding a safe space, or whether we're just carrying that sense of, actually, I don't feel safe anywhere a lot of the time.
Yeah, I agree.
So the more we're able to hold that space for ourselves, then we're able to be like, communicate effectively in those spaces. So there's a lot of power and empowerment that we can hold for ourselves. And it's important that team managers make sure they're clearing up their own stuff, because they often project their anxiety.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I was in child protection, I worked with a manager who, she went for a big bereavement herself. So she was really struggling with so many stuff, constantly go. It's overwhelming. And I was just like, oh my God, this feels too overwhelming. I didn't have the skills at that time to know how to effectively manage for my own emotions for myself. So I was at a point, I ended up leaving. I was in child protection for...
done.
No, I was I got just almost a year, and I was like, do you know what, I'm done.
Yeah.
Because it is really, especially in child protection roles where it's heavy work, where for managers to have that capacity and that space. Often, especially in local authorities, managers don't have spaces for that. And that is really important as well.
We don't. And I have to reflect as well. There's been times as a manager whereby I haven't had the space.
Yeah.
Because I'm dealing with so much. And I reflect on as well that there's times where actually, where my social workers may have needed more of me, I haven't had the time and the space. But one thing, Natalie, I have taken responsibility for is that when I've gone to team meetings, I have gone and said to the team, when I haven't had the space, that, you know what, I haven't had the space where I wanted to. And I think it's so for me, part of also being safe is also being open to be safe.
Yes.
So I've often gone and said, actually, look, to the team, look, at times whereby, I haven't had the space, I genuinely haven't, because I've been so inundated. So, it's not about you, but I have to create the space to give you guys the space. Even if things whereby, I might have missed a supervision or so, or we've been so tired, I've had to be vulnerable enough. And I think part of being safe is also learning to also be vulnerable and being open. And then obviously, as you said, going through those acronyms to be able to say, right, okay, this is how I need to be safe. This is what my expectations are, anxiety, how I deal with it. This is fear. But you know what? You are right, Natalie. The main thing which you said is that we are in this job role. We did a degree. And guys, I'm not firing any shot. I'm just saying where Natalie is correct. Part of our PCF, domain 1, our values, domain 9, leadership. We did do this degree, 3-year degree or 2-year step up, whatever one we did. We signed up to this job role. So we also, as well as obviously me saying to my fellow managers that we have to create a safe space, we as social workers have to have that professional autonomy to be able to create those safe spaces. So if, Natalie said, going for a walk, going to the gym, making sure you plan your annual leave, making sure you take your toil, we also have to be able to create that for ourselves, but I would also say to everybody, I think what Natalie does for the well-being, I would urge social workers and managers across local authorities to sign up to what Natalie is doing, the sessions, because I've been to them and I can say how it's helped me to slow down my thinking as well and be a lot more holistic and also a lot more measured in terms of how I'm doing social work as a practitioner, but also how I'm doing social work as a manager.
Absolutely.
But before we wrap up, Natalie, there's one thing you didn't talk about before we go.
What did I say?
You're a practice educator.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How long have you been doing that for?
So how long? Since my social workers in schools role. So that's what, almost 3 years. But basically I love supporting like newly qualified social workers, which is in my current role, delivering training, love all of that stuff. So basically, being able to it aligns so well with the work that I do in terms of
Yeah.
well-being. But yeah, doing all that good
All
stuff.
that good
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So Natalie, before we go, where can everybody find you?
You can find me at the social life _ on Instagram, but I'm mainly on LinkedIn. So Natalie Robertson on LinkedIn. And yeah, like message me, DM me. I deliver consultations to social workers. I deliver consultation to local authorities, managers around how you can actually cultivate that space. I'm always curious to understand actually what are you doing already. There's going to be lots of fantastic things that you do, but actually there's always deeper that we can go in terms of holding that space so that we can better manage that stress for ourselves, to be able to better support the families that we're working with ultimately.
Fantastic. Well, Natalie, I want to thank you so much for this episode. You know what? I felt very, very reflective. It's really, really got me thinking a lot. I really have reflected a lot. I think it was really, really brilliant to have you on. So thank you so much. So guys, please make sure you book in your time with Natalie. Please, please, please book in your time. You know, health is wealth. Make sure you have an outlet for yourselves, you know. But no, Natalie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. But you know where to find myself and Rob. You like, subscribe, and share. We'll see you soon.